Now, always the Zoom windows are in the way of me presenting the PowerPoint. Let's see if I can get it to work. Okay, yay! It's pretty hit or miss if I can get the PowerPoint to work. Hello, everyone that is starting to join our live event. It should be going live on SASA's Facebook, Zoom, and Twitch right now. So as always, I'm Lauren, the live events team leader. Thank you all for coming. Today, we are doing our SASA monthly book club for A Fatal Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, Murder Mystery in Ancient Rome by Emma Soughton. Hosted by Jack Chandler, who is one of our lovely SASA volunteers. And everything is slightly Halloween themed today because we are starting our Halloween bash in 2 days. So I have to at least mention it, but I will get into that in actually the next slide. So first, as always, what is SASA? SASA stands for Save Ancient Studies Alliance. Our mission is to reverse the current downward trend in the study of the ancient world by engaging the public and bringing together students and scholars to share their passion for the study of the ancient world in order to inspire a vast new generation of students. So of course, we are doing this through many ways. As always, check out our website. We have our social media platforms, which I'll also show in a second for you to follow, where we have the Inspire campaign. We advertise for our live events that we have, which we're just starting up Archeo Gaming next week again, live Archeo Gaming. So we're really excited about that. And then we also do research on the downward trend. And we have our open access database that I think officially has 1,000 websites on it now. So it's a searchable database also on our website at saveancientstudies.org. So go and check that out. As I said, this is a lineup for the Halloween bash. So we have events basically every day for 10 days starting on Monday. And this was our like little mini opener for it because it happened to be scheduled right before it too. So as usual, go to saveancientstudies.org/Halloween bash, where you can find this list of events and RSVP to them. A few of them will be live streamed like this one. The Lovecraft one with ST Joshi will also be live streamed, but most of them are private master classes. So you have to RSVP to get the Zoom link. So make sure you RSVP in time. Of course, this is our social media. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for our Inspire campaign, where we post a various amount of things about the ancient world. And then our live streams are also on YouTube and Twitch, and we use Discord for our Archeo Gaming, so check that out. And then the protocol for the event, of course, be kind, listen, and ask thoughtful questions. Please remember to send in your questions. We would love to hear from you, any comments or questions that you have about what they're chatting about. Please be patient with technology and those administering it. SASA live events, as I said, are streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, and the recordings are saved there. And of course, have fun. And then again, if you go to saveancientstudies.org/Halloween bash, that's where you can find out more about the fundraiser we have going on this week, coming up week, and all those other events that are during it. So with that, I am going to stop screen sharing and hand it over to Jack, our lovely host for this event.
Well, thank you. So hello, everyone who is listening or will be listening in the future to do whatever they do in the future with this event. That's to listen while they're writing out various Latin texts or whatever else. I'm Jack Chandler. That's really it. There's nothing else special other than a volunteer. And this is the lovely Dr. Emma Southern. She does a lot of works in the Republic of Rome and the early Principe, I'm assuming, from the works I've read so far. But she can introduce herself better than I ever can. So go ahead.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Dr. Emma Southern. Yeah, I'm a writer about Roman history. I did my PhD at Birmingham, finished in 2013. That was actually on late antiquity, on the late antique family and the early church. But since I left academia, I have found that it's harder to persuade people to read about late antiquity. So I'm sneaking in with some Republican and early Principate stuff and some Julio-Claudians. And then eventually I'll persuade people to trust me enough to take them into late antiquity with me. But my first book was a biography of Agrippina the Younger. And then this is my second book, A Fatal Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, which is about murder in kind of the main period of Roman history, the best documented period of Roman history.
Yes, absolutely. And I do agree with the antiquity part. I'm currently doing on St. Augustine, and yes, trying people to read about St. Augustine, how thrilling he is as a person is a far more difficult than Caligula going mad and trolling people, as a modern perception would put it.
Yeah.
So obviously, one fundamental question you always ask, why murder in Rome? What made you, did you sit down one day and think, yes, I really like murder. Let's write about it. What epiphany came to you and thought of such a work?
Disturbingly, it was sort of like that. It's came about. I don't usually have like a really clear genesis, but this one does have a very specific genesis point, which is it was on the day that the Golden State Killer was caught in California. And I'm a kind of true crime fan and know a lot of other people who are into true crime, love a true crime podcast. And was talking to a lot of people about it. It was like obviously a really big deal in kind of true crime communities. And I was talking to a friend of mine who is a history teacher in Georgia about it. And then about 2/3 of the way through the day, we got that feeling that you sometimes get when you're really excited about true crime stuff, where you feel a bit squicky about it. And you're like, am I being weird? Yeah. Is this... what are the ethics of me doing this? And we were kind of talking about like, oh, why are we interested in it? And she was saying that it's an interesting way to think about history and to think about culture, to think about the crimes that people can get away with and what crimes cause a big disturbance, and particularly with murders, like what life do we value in the world? And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Like, oh yeah, you can totally teach about like the expansion of American cities and the American industrial expansion with H.H. Holmes, for example, or American homophobia with Jeffrey Dahmer and like 1980s kind of culture around gay men. I thought, oh, I bet someone's written a really good book about that in Rome. Like, I bet someone has done something really good on homicide and Roman like cultural mores, and they hadn't. And I searched for ages and I couldn't really find much. Like, there's a bunch about death in general and some stuff about kind of crime and policing, but I couldn't find anything on murder. So I thought, well, now I'm invested, so I'm going to have to write it. So by that time, I really wanted to know what like the answer was. So that was the specific genesis, as I really wanted to know, like, you can tell a lot about a culture at a specific point in time and how it changes by what it reacts to as being weird, what it reacts to as being worthy of talking about, what it thinks is important to warn people about. Like, our culture like really gets het up when white women are murdered, especially if they're murdered outside of a domestic sphere. Like, we've had the whole thing with Sarah Everard here recently. And there's a whole thing, like, if a white girl goes missing, and she's a white middle-class girl with blonde hair, then the entire country will shut down until that's resolved. But anybody else outside of that, there you then get varying, like a child, you might get a response. But, you know, once you move into different races, once you move into men going missing, once you move into people of different classes going missing, you get completely different responses. And so you see there, that's what we value, is kind of white female fragility. And that's what we want to protect, which you'll then find evidence of everywhere. So I thought, oh, I really want to know what the Romans want to protect. Like, what are they into? Turns out senators, just senators.
Yeah, definitely the senators. And I absolutely agree. I mean, especially for the Romans particularly, I mean, you know, very interesting class structure of Rome, all their various distinctions. And even they always seem to have some distinction, even in the later empires. You very correctly noted even when they all became citizens, they were still better citizens. So the honorists, even when Caracalla did his thing, well, this is actually better citizens. Great.
We are the better ones, yeah.
Yeah, which is typical Romans. And also when you Cassius Dio, and he's just like, you know, I can't believe it. Freeman near me. Like, what is this? Like Caracalla's main criticisms.
And then the patricians wearing special little half moons on their shoes, so that everybody knows that they're a senator, but they're better than those senators over there. Like, there's always a way of very physically showing showing where you are in that hierarchy. And they're so obsessed with that hierarchy in all situations of, like, you know, at dinner, you know exactly where you stand in a hierarchy depending on where you're sitting. And are you going to be in the same place tomorrow, or will it be somewhere else? Have you been allowed in a group with people, or are you allowed to see them by themselves? Like, they're so kind of constant. It's so anxiety inducing for me to imagine living in Rome. Like, every minute of their day as a person, like, of those higher ranks, is spent like jostling and hoping and trying to move up. Like, do I get an extra stripe on my tunic? Do I get an extra, like, it's so silly.
it's great, and you can tell at least the source, obviously, all the mostly senators or equites at least, and how obsessed they are when they obviously when die again. They see a lower go up, they're like, oh, this is problematic, guys. You can't have this. That's it's great, but also it's I won't get over. It's the point when you made on the religious deaths, these sacrificed humans. One human sacrifice, they all go, that's too far, guys. We can have a massive war at Cannae and lose like 78,000 men. That's okay. That's normal. That's normal death. That death is bad death. It's absolute, and that badly blew me. I never thought of it before. I've read all this, thought, that is really strange, isn't it? Only the Romans think there's a proper way to die, and that's not it. It's
doing it in a sacred situation is bad. And then they will, when they are clearly doing like what any other culture would call a human sacrifice, like when they're killing a Vestal Virgin because she has lost her virginity, like you call any other culture would be like, we sacrificed her so that the gods would stop being cross at us. And they're like, no, we just put her in a hole and then she died.
It's technically not murder.
We didn't kill her. And they put like quite a lot of effort into distancing themselves from it. And then when they talk about, like, they know that in their past they did sacrifice 2 Gauls and 2 Greeks, and that they still kind of commemorate that. But like when Cicero talks about it, or when anyone puts it in history, they kind of tiptoe around the subject a lot, and try really hard not to say what it was, and they will just do anything they can to distance themselves from the fact that they have done human sacrifice a few times in their time. But the gods took her after we locked her in the hole, and that is
it's
a mere coincidence that those things happened at the same time.
Who would have thought looking behind?
Who could have predicted?
And it's just like, again, like you think the Romans, so the Via Appia, when very famously Augustus just put 4,000 slaves apparently across the whole Via Appia, just always people murdered and dying slowly, horrific deaths, and that's like, that's completely okay, because the senators fine. Anyway. And then, guys, we can't sacrifice personally to the god, we have to pretend we're not sacrificing. It's just the Romans of such a fascinating thing. Again, I never thought of it. I was just like, I just never thought of it. I thought it was a great point.
It is fascinating once you start to think about it, because they have really complex ways of thinking about like when it's okay to die and who it's okay to die, like, and it changes depending on, like, again, your social standing, and even like suicide, like in what way is it okay to commit suicide? Like Nero has to get his enslaved person to stab him, and then therefore he's a coward and an idiot. Everybody else just gets their attendant to hold the sword, and then they do the pushing, and it's like that tiny little like technically the situation is the same, but depending on who is putting the force in changes it completely. And just they have such complicated feelings about how it's okay to die, and when it's okay to see a person dying, which is all the time. They're so fine with seeing people dying, especially if they are infames or enslaved. They're just like seems like an everyday thing. And they've laud people for allowing people to watch them die. Like they're really into Seneca having everybody come round and have chats as he fails to bleed out in a bath.
Daniels is just things like Tacitus 15, 58, 56. He's just everyone come around, family, friends,
come around, you want to have a chat? How's the family?
And it's fascinating, that scene, because I've read now, but I think we know it's so detailed because Fabricus, the guy who wrote about it, who did Tacitus use, was there, and he's just like, so you just think this guy, your friend's dying, you're just like, hang on, let me just take some notes for you.
Just going to jot down some observations.
You're dying slowly. That's good to know, friend.
Got any feelings about it that you want to share?
Well, I know in Seneca, he'd be like, we have to pursue on because he's a Stoic. So, of course, if it was
I've got
Seneca,
no feelings. Yeah. In fact, I've got a lecture for you about how you shouldn't have any feelings about it either. I was reading Seneca recently, actually, for the next one. I was reading his Consolations, and all I could think was, imagine what it must be like to be friends with Seneca or to be his relative and have him send you a letter, and then you open it and you're like, oh good, it's another massive scroll that's just how I'm not like other girls.
Yes, it's great.
Dear help you.
It's funny though, because I've heard from one of his letters, he's like, don't worry, I'm not Epictetus, he's even stricter. It's like, well, thank you, Seneca. We appreciate you're not as mean as Epictetus.
At least he's not that. But yeah, I just feel like if you ever got a letter from Seneca, you'd just be like, oh,
God,
well, I've set aside the afternoon. It's a long one.
That's probably why it's there for so long. I can imagine just he's like, come on, guys, I'm trying to die here, be respectful. But another thing I found fascinating, because obviously this links really well to your other works I've read as Agrippina Younger, because that's how I introduced your work. Because I was doing work on Agrippina last year, I did a paper on her. And I was like, oh, let's find works on Agrippina the Younger. Not many. And I came across, I saw a pattern, and this was the mention of some female stories as well, because obviously in Rome, the Romans being Romans, there aren't, you get stories of emperors being killed in some ridiculous way, like fun Caligula getting killed by annoying a guy apparently over and over again, because grand old Caligula.
Troll, bless him. Yeah.
Yeah, apparently, yeah. I think it's best to call him. If he had Twitter today, he would have a troll account and probably be winding up someone on Twitter all day.
He'd be there insisting.
If the reincarnation's real, they've reincarnated as trolls, as Caligula's spirits. Lives on through them. But I found it fascinating. You've really focused on your stories as well, of like, just your average lady getting killed. So if you found like from inscriptions to crazy stories, I don't think I first name now, but I killed his wife. Even the Romans are like, wow, you're a real horrible person. Like, come on, guys, it's the way you beat your wife, and that's not the way. That's too far.
Yeah, Regulus. Yeah, he very Regulus. Atticus Herodes killed Regula. He made two mistakes. One, he was Greek, and two, he killed a woman whose husband was whose brother was better connected than he was, and he had her, bless her, beaten to death for annoying him. He was like that. Like every story about Hereds Atticus, even the ones that are technically in his hagiography, in the lives of the philosophers, are like, wow, you're an awful person. Like there's a great story about him trying to shove Antoninus Pius off a mountain that I find really, really funny.
There's like relaxed emperor of all of them, just kind of there. I suppose there was people call him the guy who was kind of there. I think it's one of my professors put it. But the one thing anyone knows about him, which is not even that many people, is that he got into a fight with Hereds Atticus. But Herodes beat poor Regula to death, but she was the sister. She was very, very well connected, like ancient family. Her brother is like patrician, senator, ex-consul, whereas Hereds Atticus is from a newer family and is Greek. And so he actually gets taken to public court for killing his wife, which is really unusual. Like if he had been a bit more polite or secretive about it, or it just hadn't been such a dickhead, then he probably would have just been fine and nobody ever would have known about it, and it would never have been written down. And in fact, because he built the big new still working theatre that's not on the side of the Acropolis, that's the Hereds Atticus Theatre, which he built in memoriam for the woman he murdered. And in fact, that what we would say about him is, he loved his wife so much that he built a theatre for her. But because of this, we know he killed her. But unfortunately, Regulus was really, really bad at public speaking, and Hereds Atticus was very, very good at public speaking. And the story goes that Regulus just stood up and listed off his family, like did the classic Roman thing of being like, my great 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 grandfather did this, and my great 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 grandfather did this, and my father did this, and I'm a consul and I come from a line of consuls, and and these are all my traditions. And everybody was just like, and then Hereds Atticus stood up and went, didn't do it, so and like gave a halfway decent speech where he was like, no, I didn't do it, and everybody decided to go with him because he was more charming. But he was a terrible man. I mean, like, he's definitely not helped himself again fight the emperor. Like, it's this guy by emperor, he killed his wife as well. Oh well, we're taking you to court. I mean, but it's weird though, think that the only way it goes to court is through the male connections.
Yeah,
that's the only way. It's only through male connections. It's not. or as you said, the Tiberius story, Tiberius just seemed a bit interested. He was like, oh, this seems interesting. Looks like that gives me probably being bored all day,
Yeah.
Finally stop being grumpy for once.
He is grumpy, bless him. That story is again though because of the male connection, because the Apronia is the woman who is murdered. She's pushed out of a window by her husband, and her father is friends with Tiberius and is a ex-consul, patrician, has triumphal ornaments, which is as good as it gets, and he basically refuses to believe that his daughter would kill herself in such a weird manner by throwing herself out of a window. And so he drags her husband in front of Tiberius and says, answer for yourself. And Tacitus says he gives an incoherent answer, but basically he says that she just fell out of the window while he was asleep. And Tiberius is apparently bored that day and gets a bit Columbo. And goes and does a crime scene investigation, which is something that never happens again before or since. But so unexpected is it that anyone will do a crime scene investigation that even though it's a day later, no one has cleared up. Like no one's run a mop round or tidied up from the bedroom. So the bedroom is still in disarray, and it's very obvious from whatever the situation is there that she's been launched out of the window and did not go willingly. And so Tiberius allows him to be taken to court and gives permission for him to be prosecuted. But again, it's only because her father throws such a makes such a big deal out of it and has the connections to make a big deal out of it, because otherwise all of this stuff, so we don't see that many domestic murders, and you can count on one hand the amount of like women we know who were killed by their husbands, and none of them I think were found guilty. And they were and it's because this would be like a private matter. This would be a private court matter. So you would either deal with it within the family, or you would get like a family friend to come in. And Valerius Maximus talks about like interesting private courts where two families would get together and then get a third party to come in and kind of oversee it. So we know that they happened and that this is the kind of thing that they would oversee. But because you don't want people to know about this stuff. This is a private in the home matter that you
especially
killed
the task focused Romans, I can imagine they're very, that would be, and all the patrons and also all their slaves and all their clients, it would be shush or else,
exactly.
Especially for the poor old slaves. They knew stuff.
Enslaved people don't get any not unless they want to get tortured in a courtroom. But so it's all closed doors unless there is a big public event, and that happens because something is because people are really famous. They're basically celebrity trials.
Absolutely, well, to be like some big patrician family or consular family, and that's because the father's so important they have to listen to him because he's got the fancy shoes, so he gets to say something about his daughter.
Fancy shoes. The fanciest of all the shoes.
But another thing I really quote on the book, which I remember in my Tacitus myself in the annuals, is when people block to stop the killing of all the freedmen and slaves in that house. I never forget that scene because it is very odd. When you think of Romans, obviously you always get the sources from the higher elite. You don't get, I know Marcus from, the workman writes a large, lovely work. No, best you get maybe some tablets at best. They've been the land or papyri in Egypt, but even then, that's usually from at least the trading class or soldiers. If you're lucky.
Yeah.
And it's weird to think there's a large scene of people like, killing 500 people might be a bit harsh. And even Nero's like, I have to intervene on this. And it's like, it does at the very least give us one positive side that most people at the very least thought the mass murder of 500, including children. There's a limit, guys.
That was a line, apparently. So the story is that Pedana Secundus gets killed by an enslaved person in his household, and the law is that which is not that old a law, but the law is that every single enslaved person in the household has to be executed as punishment in order to make sure that nobody else does this. And it is a big deal because there's 450 people, something like that, in that household who are going to be executed, men, women, children, all of whom had nothing to do with this. And it becomes a big issue because they have a debate in the Senate about whether this is okay. And there's clearly people, even in the upper classes, who are saying, oh, maybe this is a bit much. Like that's a lot of people that we're going to have to crucify all in one go. and they debate the situation, and eventually they're talked round because those in favor say literally and very, very openly say, look, there's loads of them. There's loads of enslaved people. We all go home to hundreds of enslaved people in our houses, hundreds of enslaved people in our villas. We all are surrounded by people that we own. And if we give them a millimeter and let them think that they can kill us and that there won't be massive, massive recriminations, then we will go to bed scared every single night. And it's more important that I can go home and sleep safely and that I can go home and live my life surrounded by people who I own as property than it is to save these people's lives. And so they have this like, oh, that like these are people that we're killing situation. But when it comes down to it, their ideology that they want to keep their way of life, basically, and they would rather sleep safely as individuals than let anybody have even the slightest modicum that there might be some way out of this, of their enslavement, that they're like, oh no, we'd better just do it. And then the people that don't have that investment, like the people you see rioting in the streets in that, who are stoning the soldiers and trying to stop them, are those who don't go home to a house full of 100 enslaved people who do everything for them and who dress them and clothe them. Like they don't have that feeling that they need to uphold the state apparatus and the status quo. They're like, what the fuck? Like, that's so many people. And so they have a much more, I would say, normal reaction and try to stop it. But in the end, the power of the Roman state is overwhelming. Like they have 11,000 people in the Praetorian Guard that can come out and surround these people so that they can be nailed to crosses in the street just outside the walls. And the general person of Rome cannot fight that, basically, and that's how Rome gets to maintain its status quo. And it's really revealing as an incident which reveals quite why they are so invested in massive violence whenever they feel like they need it. Like they just won't let anybody have a fraction of a millimeter of wiggle room in their oppression, and two, that they know, like in their hearts, that what they're doing is kind of wrong.
It's kind of weird in my head. I'm just thinking they probably take what they say, what Tony say what Olivia said, let them fear me long as they hate me, kind of thing. But they're doing it en masse instead.
Pretty much. Like they don't care as long as they're terrified. And then when you read like enslavement manuals, Jerry Toner did a book a couple of years ago, like putting together a fictionalized called How to Manage Your Slaves, like a fictionalized slave manual, basically pulling together various ones. And like there's a whole chapter about how to psychologically torture the enslaved people in your household in order to stop them from having even a moment of hope, essentially. Or you can give them a bit of hope, but make sure that they're constantly aware that you can take it away. So you might let them have a wife and keep a child, but they have to be constantly aware that you can take it away at any time. And it's like they would sit and think about this quite seriously and then write down little books to give to other people about how to basically inflict psychological torture on other living human beings. They're fucking horrible, the Romans. Sorry, I keep swearing.
No,
they are dreadful. They're a horrible set of people.
You sometimes you do really think, my goodness, because even when you read like Plutarch and stuff, even he's kind of like, because I think Plutarch's a very nice life of Cato and Cato the Elder, and he's like, I can't believe he treated his slaves so harshly by sending them off by property. He goes, when we have slaves, we kind of treat them like cattle, and we love our old cattle. It's like, right, thank you, Plutarch. But he's like, it's like your old bull. You've got to be nice to your old bull. It's like,
let them go in a field.
Like, but it's like, look, we may treat it as cattle, but we treat it like, we like our cattle. You don't like your cattle. Like, right.
Cato's a real one. I sort of love Cato. He's so mad. God bless him. He's like everything about Cato, you just can't believe he really existed. He's simultaneously horrible and deranged.
very interestingly, very serious Roman, but of course he was idealized by Romans. They thought, yeah, that's what I want to be when I'm older. Like it was when you read like Cato's Republica, he just has like a whole part just dedicated to praise him. He's like, yes, this man is what we should all be. It's like, yeah, that's Cicero. Thank you, Cicero. But that's Cicero trying to be friends with the new patrician cool kids. So
yes, this is a great joy of Cicero, is that he's so transparent.
It's actually, I know it's a bit off topic, it's transparency with dealing with slaves, the old oligarch, pseudo Xenophon. I never forget, he's probably the most honest of them all. I think it's 323 of the Constitution of the Spartans. I always thought this. He says, I can't believe we can't punch slaves in the street because it could be a poor person. That was his complaint against Athens.
Can't even tell the difference.
It's like, at least he's honest. And he says, I get why they like democracy. If I was poor, I would like democracy too.
I'd love not
thank you for the honesty.
There's a bit in, I want to say it's in Tacitus, but the Romans have a debate about whether they should make it might be in Livy, whether they should make enslaved people wear some kind of special outfit. And then they decide that no, they shouldn't, because if enslaved people realize how much they outnumber free people, then that might be a problem for them. So they'll just go along not knowing who they can punch in the face and who they can't. Although they happily did punch people in the face. There's a great story in Pliny the Younger's letters with a guy who was later murdered by his slaves. But he was walking through some very busy baths one day, like provincial baths, and he had his two attendants with him who were getting people out of the way because he was praetor, I think, or ex-praetor, so he was like getting people out of the way and doing the make way, my master's coming through. And he touched a guy on the arm to move him out of the way, and this guy just swung round to punch the enslaved guy in the face. Like his immediate reaction was just to punch him as hard as he could. He missed and hit the praetor, his name is Mikado, and knocks him on his ass. Which Pliny tells us the most hilarious story. This is so funny that he got punched in the face. But when you read it, you're like, and was that normal? Just to a light touch on the arm, and your immediate reaction is to just try to knock this guy out, because that's kind of wild.
Yeah, it's crazy, because again, it's so when you read that, again, it reminds me of the Athenian work of Patridae, patricians, the well fathers, the well born, like how they're complaining that we just can't punch people on the street because they could just be a poor citizen, because they can't tell the difference. It's like, can't tell the difference. Good perspective.
What a pain to wonder, spend your days walking around going, can't even, wish I could punch someone right now.
I just hit this random poor person on the street. Oh, goodness me. What? And he's praising Sparta's helots. It's like, but it's crazy when you look at the slave system, and because when you get the proper media, you look at the 300 Spartans, or you look at gladiators, all very idealized, and everyone's heroic, and everyone's yes, all together for this, and you just think, no, most people we're not having a fun time either way, depending on who was ruling, No, most people were not having a good time, and the estimates, particularly for slavery in the Roman Empire, are crazy. Walter Scheidel's ones are the ones I usually go with, just because I feel like I would trust him he loves a number, and anybody who likes a number that much, I feel, can be trusted with numbers. Not many historians like numbers very much, so Walter Scheidel loves a number. He does describe himself as the world's foremost active duty Roman historian on his website, which I find to be hilarious, because I've never really thought about doing history as doing active duty, like I've been deployed somewhere. I mean, I know reading Olivia could be a bit of pain, but Jesus,
yeah, I know, but I've never thought of it. But then I don't do numbers, so maybe that's why he feels that way. But his estimates are up to 10 million people at any point in the empire are enslaved, which is just such a huge number of people. Once you spread that over the 1,000 years of the Roman Empire, then the kind of, I think I describe it as looking into an abyss, because once you start thinking about it, it's like a hole opens up and you're like there's so much. misery and depression, and and it's so easily overlooked in all of the sources. You have to put it in yourself, and slot it in behind all of the literary sources when you're reading them, that all of this is supported by a vast slavery empire, and not one of these people even puts their own shoes on in the morning.
Yeah, and it was horrible. Because I told my class, oh, we should go back to Rome. I was like, no, we shouldn't, because the Romans were guys like, no, they're not just the lovely, beautiful classical buildings. That's the rare part, I'm afraid. That's an exception to the rule. They're not all, the great, lovely, grand philosophers who also have weird ideas. But it's like, no, you don't understand the amount of slavery and cruelty and the lack of rights most people would have, even if you were a citizen. If you got killed by some rich, angry senator, likely chance you're not going to get justice for anyone involved.
No. Almost certainly not. And even if you are a senator, it still kind of sucks, because if you're living under the imperial system, then what you're doing, you're spending all your time, I don't know, telling Domitian that you think he's brilliant, and secretly going home and writing in your diary that you think he's rubbish.
Or being trolled by Caligula, apparently.
Or being trolled by Caligula. And then having to tell him that you think he's brilliant to his face, or trying to tell Tiberius that he's brilliant, and every time you tell him he's brilliant, he's like, you stop telling me I'm brilliant. But you can't stop yourself, you don't know what else to do. I really feel like life as a senator would probably suck just as much. You're the only person that anybody in the empire cares about, but at the same time, your life is just a kind of fairly miserable round of trying to decide what the emperor wants.
Yeah, and it's constant anxiety as well. I mean, if you tick off the emperor once, it's all over. If your slaves revolt, it's all over, and you're just the anxiety of living like that too.
What if the emperor fancies your wife and then he sends you off to live in farthest corner of Spain for a decade so that he can bang her? What if, it's maybe it's just that I have massive anxiety, that the idea of hanging out in the imperial court makes me want to fling myself into the sea. But I think I'd rather take my chances as a peasant woman running a bar or something.
I kind of can't blame Tiberius to run away to Rhodes now, thinking about it. He's like, I don't want to be emperor. Augustus just runs away to Rhodes. He's like, that's the easier life for me.
I am writing a biography of Agrippina the Elder at the moment. And so I'm writing a lot about Tiberius and their relationship. And the more I reread Tacitus's version of him, and the more I look at him and what he did, the more I'm just like, one, he probably should have stayed in Rhodes that first time. The first time he left, he should have just stayed, because he clearly does not want to be here at all. And the more I'm like, no wonder he just buggered off when it came down to it. When he was just like, I can't take it anymore. Because his interactions with the Senate are all them going, can we put up a temple to you? And him saying no. And then them going, well, can we make our own decisions? And him saying, also no. And they're like, okay, well, we sort of made this decision. He's like, well, I don't like it. I'm not going to tell you what I don't like about it, but they're just kind of constantly hounding him. And he doesn't really know how to deal with them. They don't really know how to deal with him. They all openly despise one another. And he's just miserable constantly. I always feel sorry for Tiberius a bit. He's just he doesn't know what he's doing at all.
It's Tiberius is an interesting character. Well, they say, always the tyrant narratives, of course, of the narrative of Suetonius. He generates into this because of sycophancy, or Caligula, he becomes or Nero is very interesting characters, but and all of whom, well, obviously Nero gets murdered and Caligula gets murdered in interesting ways, but well, once himself, but fun Romans. And then another interesting thing we also found was the modern comparisons. I thought were quite funny. I think it's page 139. There's a comparison. I think it was if it was a PewDiePie moment or something when he swore or something. That comparison I saw in there. And I saw one was called Tiberius Gracchus, a centrist dad. I thought was quite funny as well. But that kind of is what he did.
He is a centrist dad. Yeah. The PewDiePie one is the one where there's Hadrian. There's this line in Galen where Hadrian just stabs an enslaved guy in the eye with a pen, and out of nowhere. And so my feeling is that this in the same way that sometimes a streamer will say a racial slur while cross, and you know that that's in their heart, because I've been cross many times and I've never screamed a racial slur at anyone or live on the internet at any point. Like, you know that lives in their little heart. You know that inside Hadrian's heart was this boiling rage that he would sometimes just take out by stabbing people in the eye. I like to do a modern comparison because I like things to be, it's for me as much as anything, which is that I want it to be I want to relate to it, basically. Like, what is this that's happening? It's not like these are people that existed and who breathed and lived and had bodies and feelings. And they're not that different. They're not like another species or anything. They're a different culture and they have different cultural ways, but at their core, they're still people. And so this is like their way of expressing kind of monstrous feelings inside of them, is to do a stabbing. And it tends to less often happen that people get stabbed in the eye because we don't have access to underlings that we can stab in the eye without consequences, but you can do a lot of screaming things that you know in full well that you shouldn't be screaming. And it makes it easier for me to wrap my head around the fact that they are people, and that I always want to be reminding myself of, basically, and that there are analogues of them. They're not completely alien in some way that we can't even begin to imagine. And because when I read a lot of books, I always feel like they're describing not people, like they're describing something that is almost human, but not quite. Like, a lot of books want all political actors from the past to be completely rational all the time. And they will be like, why did they do this? The only rational reason they could do this is XYZ. I'm like, yeah, but what if they're just stupid?
I mean, yeah, it's kind of like, well, what did rationally Caligula make fun of his guard? Well, maybe just pip an arsehole, maybe.
And if he's an arsehole, then what kind of arsehole is he? He's the kind of arsehole that would go on 4chan and then make up an image that says that you can charge your iPhone by putting it in the microphone.
I could definitely see him doing that in the modern world. I could see a modern Caligula just going and going, oh, this is brilliant, exactly where I belong, you know?
Spend days on the internet laughing hysterically as people go, I put my iPhone in the microwave and now it's exploded. Like, he would find that so funny. And he clearly finds it very, very funny to make Korea say sex words and watch him blush. Like, he finds that it is quite funny, to be fair. But he clearly finds that just generally hilarious. And so I like to have a modern analog, basically, partly for myself, but then also for anyone who's reading it, to be like, look, these are people, and you know people like this, and you can imagine this person walking around in the world. And I think once you can imagine it, because this person walking around and, you know, blowing their nose, then you can imagine them. You can be more in their shoes as they are doing the stuff that you do not experience, like ruling an empire or
it's definitely more relatable as well for most people, because when you read some books, you're thinking, good, that's me. This is very old hat, very, oh god, you're like reading through like, you know, swaths and swaths of numbers on like one coin. And you're like, most people aren't going to read that for like a day, for like a minute. But when they see actual analogies, they can go, oh yes, I can relate to that. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, they obviously most of the context, oh, they're Romans, of course, but as you said rightly, they are people, they are humans, and humans do weird and crazy things, because that's just how humanity goes, apparently. And Caligula thought it'd be a funny idea to upset the Senate, and well, it didn't end well.
It was quite funny briefly, and then it wasn't. Just like when people lose their jobs for doing weird trolly stuff on the internet, then it ends up not being funny.
Funny, well, no. But then I think the Gracchi one as well, I thought that was quite hilarious. I just think, he kind of is like that in a weird way. He was trying to like everyone.
He tried to please everyone. And he almost would have been more successful if he hadn't tried to please the Senate so much and the Optimates, if he had just gone full hardcore Jeremy Corbyn. At the time when I was writing that, there was like pure, this is going to completely alienate anyone American who was watching, but it was like at the height of that election, the Jeremy Corbyn election, what was that, 2019? It was like pure Jeremy Corbyn times when people were really getting antsy about the idea of there being a left-wing leader in the UK. It was genuinely left-wing and did not pretend in any, like, completely against Blairism. And those conversations were happening where he was saying, I'll give people free internet, I'll fund the NHS really well, I will, here are my plans to end tax evasion and to actually, do something that's genuinely left-wing, which was ended up being wildly unsuccessful because people were persuaded that this was a massive threat, and it felt so similar. But he did not try to go centrist dad. But the amount of people, because I spend too much time on Twitter, just too much. And so all I had was people complaining about centrist dads all over my timeline, being like, oh, maybe it's one thing, maybe it's another. Maybe we can please everybody and be both left wing and right wing at the same time. Like,
yeah.
Can we though?
Cracky's the first known attempt. If guys suppose Cracker's had Twitter, he won't turn everyone off like a dad. Like, oh, guys, we need to be reasonable here.
I think he would have attempted.
And then he's got Gaius Crackers. He's a bit more. Let's go.
Gaius Crackers is a fun man, pulling his toga off his shoulder and slapping his thigh, and he's got a personal musician, which I love. Like, following him around, playing music to keep him on the right tone. He's got a guy who follows him around and plays the lute, and it's like, we play exciting music when exciting things happening and calm music when you need to be calm. What a life.
I mean, it sounded like quite the bright and like his brother. I imagine a bit more. I mean, he's compared to Cleon, I think, by Plutarch. He's like the Cleon of Rome, and it's like, well, he was also quite fun, apparently.
Yeah, but yeah, he's the centrist dad of the family, certainly. But then Gaius is clearly, if you need to be controlled by music, then you probably shouldn't be going into politics. And clearly he shouldn't be going into politics because at the first sign of trouble, he raised an army and went completely wrong. You can't, once you've raised an army once, you can't come back from it.
Yeah, I think Sulla taught that one. Like, if you raise an army, you got to go. You got to go all the way. Apparently,
you'll be better at it than this.
That's just the Roman way. I mean, I think Sulla, Marius, and Kaiser practically as well was like, well, if we're going to get my army down there, better just go all the way. Kaiser tried mercy, but
well, it is. It's funny when you start looking for people who raise armies and like who raised that little army and only managed to have it go for about 2 days. You start to see loads of them, like, who try to raise a little rebellion. And I always like to think about like what it's like to be the guy who tries to raise an army and only manages to make it like 3 miles down the road, or immediately gets squished, or just all the army go, oh, actually, maybe this is a bad idea. But that happens all the time. Like, so many people throughout, from like the late Republic all the way through to like, I mean, once you get to the 3rd century, obviously it's fucking chaos, but like all the way through the allegedly stable period up to like the Marcus Aurelius-y, who the amount of times that there's a throwaway line in like Tacitus or Dio or Suetonius where it's like, oh, and then there was a guy who had 15,000 followers in Greece and he was crushed, and you're like, I would like to know more about that, please.
Like the false Neros. You're just like, wait, are false Neros and there's another Nero, and it's like people pretend to be Nero, just getting random followers and just causing havoc. It's like, just how you do in Rome,
Well, Clemens, who pretended to be Agrippa Posthumus, and who was a freedman of Agrippa Posthumus, who pretended to be him and raised like thousands of followers, and then came to Rome, and then Tiberius has him kidnapped in the night and quietly executed, which is extremely Tiberius. But still, all of these people must have been like, he said he was coming today. Have you seen him?
Well, gone, guys. Revolt is like a Facebook event, but instead we're doing a military revolt,
Yeah, and like they all came to Rome, and like hundreds of people, thousands of people came with him, and then people were waiting for him in Rome. and then he's quietly disappeared in the night. And it must have been I love thinking about the stuff that is not included in like thinking about stuff that was happening in the moment, that is in no way included in any history, like the moment when they all realize that Clemens has disappeared into the night, or like the moment when I don't know, Tiberius hears that Augustus is dead and he's like, oh God, now I'm the emperor. Or just imagining, you know, dinner between Tiberius and Livia and stuff like that. Like, what are these moments like between them? And I just love imagining what it must like, how these big historical events that end up being talked about as big historical events, how they feel like in that moment when you're having to live them minute by minute. And I suspect they mostly feel awkward and a bit weird and like you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine that when Caracalla died, like, so everyone, our emperor just died, home for a week.
Yes, I shot him while he was running away.
By the way, everyone, he went to the toilet. He's dead now. And he's kind of got his pants down. What should we do? Should we cover his willy up? You do actually think, what would they have done, those poor soldiers?
Yeah, there must have been a bunch of people standing around going, what just happened? Are we still going to Antioch, or are we?
Why not ever get over those Otho's death? Otho's the oddest one, because he's like, I'm going to kill myself so no one else has to die. It's like, he's the one person who goes, you know what, everyone?
He's the one dying.
He's like, everyone's going to die if I keep staying. I'm going to do it for everyone else. Please stop killing each other. And then obviously it doesn't work like that. But poor old Otho's like, yeah, I mean, it's actually a good way to go. And even the sources are like, well, that was actually quite nice.
Yeah, everyone has to go, you know what, fair enough. That was very heroic. We don't really know what to do with it because we don't know how to deal with actual proper heroes anymore. But that was a genuinely heroic thing to do. Yeah, there's a Handel opera of Agrippina, which is bonkers. I mean, it's like it's as they all are. It's like a comedy opera, but it has Otho in it, called Ottone, and he is he's like a proper kind of heroic, well, he's kind of like the innocent victim in the whole thing, and it's like the one thing that Otho is in popular culture, because he's never in anything, but it's like the one thing that he's in, and he's like properly good in it. And yeah, I've got a bit of a soft spot for Otho. Also, Nero stole his wife.
Getting rid of old Galba, and then that's it.
Yeah, he did do the overthrowing bit, but apparently he was he was in, I can't remember, he gets sent to Spain so that Nero can steal his wife. And apparently he does great there. Lusitania, that's it. And he has done good, like spends a good 10 years being there, and then he comes back, thinks he can do it, can't do it, so he kills himself. He's the only one who goes, you know what, this isn't going as I planned, and I don't want to spill more Roman blood than my own. So yeah, good guy. I would like to see more things about Otho.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when you go to the 3rd century, and the amount of guys who are just like, it's my turn now, it's my turn now. It's the third. I could see why you didn't include the 3rd century, because I was thinking, what's the 3rd century? I was actually thinking, if the 3rd century in this is going to be another like a book and a half with the amount of emperors dying.
No. I put those down as assassinations. But they I did the foundational ones, let's say, the ones that introduce emperor murder as a thing that you can do and get away with, but no, once you start describing people getting, I can't describe all of them, there'll be a different book.
3rd century crisis. How many emperors died? Well, let's go on.
One day I will persuade someone to let me write a book on the 3rd century crisis, and it will be really fun to write, or just the 3rd century in general. Because the fun thing about this, it becomes much harder to write the political history, but it becomes quite a lot easier to write the kind of history from below, to write kind of culture and social history, I suppose, because you have so much more in the way of sources from Egypt and epigraphy and stuff. Like, so much of the epigraphy is from the 3rd and 4th centuries, you've got way more of that to work with, but there's no like nice Tacitus that will tell you that then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. And Tacitus is so fun to work with because he gives you such good scenes that you can play with, and such good characters. I used to hate Tacitus when I was there. Like when I did A-level ancient history when I was 16. And Tacitus was obviously the boring one in comparison to Suetonius, and was known to it. And then all throughout my undergraduate, I was never into Tacitus at all. And then the more I read him now, the more I'm like, man, I did not get Tacitus. He's brilliant. He's so clever, and he's such a good writer.
Yeah, it's like how I was with Sallust when I started first year undergraduate. I know what Sallust does. Like, God, this guy just hates everyone and everything in his life, doesn't he? But he's actually quite interesting when you read through it. It's actually read through it. It's actually okay. I'm interested, but when you read him first time, you're thinking this guy just sounds miserable of his life.
Yeah,
it just sounds so
and
upset.
on first read, Tacitus just seems like he hates everyone, and he like is just reciting stuff. But then when you actually get into it, you're like, actually, he's got loads of like good characters. All of his characters feel like you know those people, and his scenes are amazing. And he really like he builds his book like a novel. Like you can use like he's got foreshadowing, and he's got these structures, and it's so obvious that he's like, and now this is the bit where we're going to start like, I've seeded all this stuff where we're talking about Sejanus, but now here's Sejanus, and you're like, but yeah, he's so great. I actually every time I read him now, I'm like, I love him a little bit more, which I never thought I would say.
Yeah, he's a fascinating one, especially I think when I did Agrippina the Younger, again, fascinating character.
Just managed to turn my camera off by
I see.
Bear with me, and I'll turn it back on again.
But he's a fascinating writer. And again, with Agrippina the Younger, we know he had her notes, like her biography, what I've shared. Like, I think it was like page book 453 or something.
Yeah.
It's like great.
Wish he'd put more of it in. If there's one thing I wish it would have been that he would say more, and I got this from Agrippina's notes, that would be very useful.
Yeah, definitely. It's because it's interesting. Agrippina read about herself, and it's like, oh well, because I found her a fascinating character. That was just, well, that's another story. But actually, saying Agrippina and Olivia, though, obviously the murders they apparently did is also part of the story. And Tacitus, Suetonius, and all that, how they all kind of converge. Oh yeah, this may have happened.
Yeah, if Livia did all those murders, given that several of them happened quite far away from Rome, then I'm genuinely impressed by it.
Yeah,
if she managed to get Gaius Caesar stabbed in Syria, then well done her, honestly, because that would mean that she was coordinating with like the Parthians in order to lure him in to a camp and then stab him. And then have him die of infection afterwards. Then if that's what she did, if she managed to put together a plot that complicated, and she managed to poison Lucius while he was in Marseille, I think, definitely in France, then again, good for her. She must be running a network of assassins that spans the empire.
Honestly, it feels like she could have just killed anyone if she felt like it. If I lost, feel like, you know what, you die.
If that's what she was doing, then well done her. If she was painting figs on a tree so that Augustus would eat them, then she is the world's greatest genius, and she deserves everything that she got to be Julia Augusta, because that's an impressive amount of effort. I'm pretty sure that she didn't. No, because it's ludicrous. And even like Tacitus can't put together a coherent theory of how she did it. He's just like, the treachery of the stepmother.
The Savia Norvica, I think, is, or the severe stepmother is always a phoenix in Rome. Like I think Barrett and the late Ginsburg had really good works in Agrippina, like about the severe stepmothers. They're coming out to kill all their children. It's actually like, when you read about Agrippina, she actually was quite upset with Tacitus when Tacitus was like, "Whoa, you don't kill Britannicus. That's a bit too far." It's like, how could she be a severe stepmother if she's been shocked by the death of Britannicus and she's now looking after the other?
Tacitus would tell you that it's because she wanted to use Britannicus against Nero. So I think there was probably a bad day for her, but I also argue quite a long time in the book that she's actually quite a good stepmother.
Especially Octavia, which you apparently spotted sets up like people get together, go around Octavia instead of Nero. She's like, well, if you don't want it, I'll go to Octavia, which is very weird. It's like, wait, but that's no story from the murder, but an interesting one to say the least.
She's a pragmatic woman, Agrippina. She is sensible, but she doesn't often kill people, in my opinion. There are other opinions are available,
especially by elite Roman standards. To be fair, I mean, elite Roman standards.
If you compare her to the amount of people that, like, you know, most people have done murder on, but these are important people, and that's the line. You see, you can kill as many unimportant people as you like, often en masse, and there will be no repercussions. But you kill one important person, and all of a sudden everyone's up in arms, and they're still writing about you thousands of years later.
Yeah, I mean, you just think about, like, you know, Caracalla when he kills always 20,000 people, it's a couple of lines, and dies 4, 5, 6 lines, and then when he kills his brother, like a big 12, you know, whole your work story.
Yeah,
it's like, hang on, he just killed 20k like freedmen and equites, but it's one person died by an entire story by Dyer, very detailed. You really want to make sure people know that he dies in his mother's arms and her breasts, and he's crying to mother, but then, oh, by the way, he killed 20k people, just to let you know.
Well, they do. Suetonius likes to do a thing, particularly where he will name every single person that a bad emperor killed, and like give you a good paragraph on each one. But then a good emperor is like, and then he killed 24 people, and that's a sentence. And like, I feel like
did away with them or something like that.
Yeah.
Victoria, he just did away with them, you know.
All of them were guilty of something, and he had to execute them, and it really wasn't his fault. But the bad emperors, you're going to get paragraph after paragraph after paragraph of each and every one in detail, and why it was very unfair that they were killed. And largely it was unfair that they were killed because it was for not a good reason, not a reason that Suetonius agrees with.
Yeah, but the fascination of narratives and history is itself.
History.
Oh, hello again. Oh, you're muted.
And I'm muted. I just realized that it is, well, for me, it's 2 p.m. For everyone is in different time zones. But anyways, it was lovely listening to you guys chat. I just wanted to say, any last questions or anything, Jack or Emma, anything else that you want to talk about? Or we can make sure to send the links to where to buy your book, of course, in the chat for these events, and have it on with the YouTube link. So yeah, other than that, anything else to wrap it up? Or remember to go to saveancientstudies.org/Halloween bash to check out the rest of the events that we have. And Emma, thank you so much for coming. This has been like so interesting learning about this stuff. And I really love the way the topic of the conversation went towards like the stuff with like how there was such a massive population of slaves in Rome, and really like this whole thing of psychological control and how that works. And it's really so interesting. And again, so like looking forward to your next book on specific.
It'll be just as grim.
Yeah, right. So thank you so much for joining us, you guys. And we will see you this whole week with events basically every day. So see you later. Bye.
Thank you all.